Okay, so I was thinking since we're talking about class struggle, I was just going to treat the Engels document, like the introduction, the principles of communism, and I wanted to pick out some themes, like some of the big ideas that I think are like relevant for class struggle, because there was a lot in there. Like Engels touched up on a lot of different ideas. And yeah, so I'm going to go through this. First, we're going to talk about what classes are, right? Classifications of people, what it means to like think about a group of people. And we'll look at like, capitalism. What is the capitalist, class structure? And then I was thinking to talk a little bit about what it means for classes to struggle, right? And especially how Marxism has thought about this. And then at the end, talk a little bit about Engels' definition of communism, right? So yeah, I think that's the roadmap. So let's get started. So class, right? The basic concept for a lot of revolutionary theories is how do we think about groups of people, right? We have different classes, right? A classification, we have groups of people in society. And we can think about, these different groups as kind of being a little bit separate from each other, right? And there's a lot of ways to do that. So the old ways, right, the ways of thinking about class, because this is not new, right? Humans have been thinking about class for thousands of years. The old versions have to do with power and money in particular, right? So you are in the ruling class if you have power. If you do not have power, right, you're a serf, right, or something, you do not have a lot of power, right? You are subjugated. Similar, we have classes about money, right? If you're poor, you're in the lower class. If you're rich, you're in the upper class. If you're in the middle, right, you're in the middle class. And we have also thought about classes in terms of consciousness, which is also a very old idea. You are in the class that you think you are in, or you're not, right? This is this question of class consciousness. Am I aware that I am in a class? It's a question. But, and these things are cool, right? These, concepts of class are very interesting and cool, but there is another concept of class that was discovered by Marx and probably by others, right, before and after him. And this concept of class is different because most societies, even though we talk about, the middle class versus the upper class versus the ruling class, right? A lot of our societies have failed to even acknowledge this other type of class, okay? And that's the one that I want to talk about with you all. Maybe some of you all have heard about these ideas, but if not, I think it's really powerful. This is, in my opinion, the most important lesson that I could teach you as a Marxist economist, if that's what I am. Okay, what is this new class? It is based on not the money, not the power, right? Not even the consciousness, but on the question of who produces the surplus. And the surplus, that's the concept. I don't know if you all have heard of this. Here's the basic idea. It's very intuitive, I think, but maybe you have not heard this. At least it blew my mind. So what the surplus is, and what Marx says, is that every human society, as long as we have had society, has been able to produce more wealth, right, more goods and services than the people who do the producing can consume, right? And we know this because we have babies, right? Babies do not work. We have elderly people who hopefully do not work. And in order for those people, the babies, the elderly, whoever else, to receive food, shelter, right, then the people, the class who produces the wealth has to produce more than they get paid, right? So if we have an 8-hour workday and we divide this up, right? So you're working, 8 hours. The first 4 hours are the work that you do that you get to consume as a productive class member, right? And Marx calls this the necessary labor. we could think about this for capitalism as your wage. Right, that's where we're going with this. So part of the day you get paid. The rest of the day you work for free. The other 4 hours is the surplus labor. And so we have a different conception of class now, right? Instead of the power and the money and the consciousness, we have the question, who produces the surplus and who gets to decide how it is spent, right? And there's a lot of different answers to this question, right? Capitalism is one, but if we go back, there is this thing called slavery. And by the way, Marx calls this the modes of production. If you're interested in the terminology, it's kind of the same thing as saying the type of economy or the way that surplus is produced and spent, right? In slavery, the productive class was the slaves, and everything that they produced was surplus. And the surplus went to a second class, the masters, who then decided how it was spent. And in most slave societies, some of this surplus labor, well, most of them, all of them actually, some of the surplus has to go to keeping the slaves alive, right? But, you know, there's no fair payment, right? We all understand slavery is a very exploitative system. Similarly, in European and I guess other societies, I can't spell also, feudalism, which is also called the tributary mode of production by politically correct people. The idea here is that the productive class, right, the serfs, is going to work for the first 3 days out of the week. And during that time, they are going to keep whatever they produce, right? You keep the direct products, like you're usually farming, right? But then, the other 3 days out of the week, you go and you work on the Lord's land, right? The Lord is the one who gets the surplus, right? So we have the serf class who produces the surplus and the lords who receive it. Both of these systems have something in common with the current economic system, capitalism. And that is this feature of exploitation, right? So Marx calls this particular process exploitation. It's not about feeling unfair. It's not about discrimination, right? It's not about military occupation, right? All of those could be exploitation. But for Marxism, this is the specific type of exploitation that has not been consciously recognized by any society. And so capitalism shares with this that the first, 4 hours, you get paid a wage, but the last 4 hours you work for free. And just to draw your attention, this is a really big deal, right? Which class, right, which group of people gets to decide how the surplus is spent is enormous social power, right? Because the surplus is spent on all sorts of things that we're going to find really relevant for our analysis of, what's going on in Palestine, but also the world, right? Surplus goes to the state, right? Taxes. And from the state is the military, the educational system, right? The state makes the laws, right? And a lot of that is paid for by the state, by the capitalist class. Surplus, into this, it's also military, etc. They also spend surplus on lawyers. When your product, harms somebody, and you, as a capitalist, in the background of all of this, is you have to maximize the profit, right? You have to maximize the surplus that you get, otherwise you don't get to be capitalist anymore, right? So you want to hire lawyers, and the lawyers are going to protect you in court when you get sued because your products are dangerous. Surplus is also spent on advertising, right? We need to sell our products. We need people to think that you will be happy if you buy Coca-Cola, right? And so The capitalist class is the group who is, performing this function, right? This is a role, right? It is a group of people. There are capitalists. They're usually the CEOs, the boards of directors. But this type of class is not, it's different from these types of class with power and money, because we're not really talking about a specific group of people, right? This is not an attribute that you as an individual have. How much money do you have? How much power do you have? This idea of class is a process, right? It is a role that people fulfill in society. And so you have some people even who are workers, but also capitalists, right? If you are self-employed, right, that's another mode of production, is individual employment, then you exploit yourself, right? So you work and you pay yourself a certain amount of money, but then you decide what to do with the rest of the surplus. Sorry, that's not exploitation, that's just spending surplus, because it's you who made it. But exploitation is any system where the people who produce the surplus don't get to decide how it is spent. So the struggle between the working class, the capitalist class, right, is something that needs to be dealt with, right? And I'm going to disagree with a lot of Marxists and say that this is not the most important thing in society, right? Class struggle is not the key determining force. It depends on what question you're asking, in my opinion. Other systems of oppression, like patriarchy and racism, can be just as important or more important for specific kinds of questions. But this is important because most societies have not even acknowledged that this exists, right? That's why this was a big deal discovery by Marx, right? This is kind of what he has to say. Okay, so the struggles between these classes, I mean, this is an obvious point, but I think it's worth saying, is these types of struggles are different than the struggles between individuals, right? And the reason this is important is because a lot of social scientists, right, economists, political science, sociology even, take these class struggles and think about them in ways as if it was two individuals having a fight, right? So I'm the working class, Annie is the capitalist class. We're gonna have a fist fight, or we're gonna play football, right? We're gonna see who, scores more points, right? Who lands more punches, who comes up with the best arguments, right? But in reality, class struggle does not work like a conflict between two individuals. It is actually a conflict between many individuals. And because of that, it is extremely complex, right? And so the term for this that comes from some Marxist, maybe Mao Zedong, I think we might read that later, is contradiction, and specifically complex contradiction. People, we were talking about Hegel last week, right? I missed that part. People often talk about dialectics, right, or contradiction as a simple combination of opposites, right? Maybe you all have heard this. You have the thesis and the antithesis, and they're opposites, and they combine, and then you get the synthesis, right? So we have, two opposites, and out of them, well, let's make this like plus and minus. And out of them comes this new thing. Who has heard this explanation of Marxism or Hegelian dialectics? Is this familiar? So you have the working class combined with the capitalist class equals communism, right? After they struggle it out, right? This is useful for thinking about, descriptively some things, right? There is a lot of simple statements that we can make about this struggle of the class struggle between the capitalists and the workers. We know the workers are kind of the good guys and the capitalists are kind of the exploiters, right? But what's really going on here, behind all of the simple reductions that we could make that might have, use for us, in society, there is actually a huge complexity, right? So much so that this plus minus thing kind of loses its meaning. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say this is the working class and this is the capitalist class, the big ones. In order to understand what the working class is, we need to connect that to a bunch of other things. Patriarchy, racism, to take, big ones as well. But also tax rates, right? What the weather was like when you were born, or the alignment of the stars, if you're into that. Where were you born, right? Or what, geographic area are we talking about? Similarly, for the capitalists, you have to, if you really want to understand what the capitalist class is, you have to look at a lot of different things, right? Capitalists believe that they work hard, right? And that they deserve to be there. Capitalists go to school. They get a really great education at Harvard, right? And so, in order to really, get a good idea of what's going on here and to understand these processes, we have to understand that the contradictions are always complex. And we actually, as humans, do not have access to the objective knowledge of what causes what. And because of that, Marx says, we need a new scientific methodology for understanding all of this mess, right? And the name for this, which I'm saying, I'm a Marxist, I've already virtue signaled, other non-Marxist theories also accept this basic idea, what I'm going to say here. And Marxists call it dialectical materialism, right? But the idea is that everything is very complex. This is going to get real messy, so sorry. And that we do not have, we can only get partial knowledge. Oh, amazing. Woo, all right. And that one. Oh, yeah, that's all right. Thank you. It's not going to fly as good. Okay. I'm going to put this really philosophically. Does anyone have any questions or comments so far? I'm trying to squeeze a lot of ideas into here. We're all following. Cool. All right. Yes.
So when we're talking about surplus, I think I understand pretty easily how taxes are part of the surplus because we don't get that. It gets taken out without us being asked or anything like that. But so if I when I TA, I have an hourly rate and I get an hourly rate for that certain number of hours. Are you saying that I should really that hourly rate should be double what it is, or are you talking about wage theft, or are you talking yeah, does that make sense?
Absolutely, great question, for sure. So let's put this back up. So the short answer is, yeah, we get paid $30 an hour. We would be paid per hour, but over the course of one day, we're going to produce a lot more than what we get paid for. So, by the hour, if the rate of exploitation was 100%, right, I produce $60 worth of value in an hour, then my wage rate per hour is going to be $30 an hour, right? So I don't know if that answers the question. There's another thing here too. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Sorry. I was blanked out there for a second. The argument from the perspective of the capitalist is this is fair, right? Exploitation is actually fair. And this is, I think, where a lot of the confusion, confusing things comes from. So from the capitalist perspective, the employer wants to pay you enough money to stay alive so that tomorrow you can come back and keep working, right? So from the capitalist perspective, the fair price of the worker is however much money you need to pay your rent, to eat your food, right? To get a Netflix subscription. You can even have some comfort things. But that's it, right? That's this first part here, right? And of course, the more we develop our productivity, it takes less and less labor to actually meet our needs. But from the worker's perspective, this is unfair because we're not paid for the value that we produce. We're just paid for whatever gets us to show up tomorrow, right? And yeah, this is all disguised, right? So yeah, in this example, yeah, we get paid $30 an hour, which is really $15 an hour because we're paid for 20 hours a week, but we really work 40 hours a week. But all that aside, right? If you make $100 in one day, you are always producing more than $100 of work for your employer. Otherwise, they will not hire you, right? I don't know, does that kind of answers the question? Righteous. All right. Any other thoughts? All good? Cool, I'll wrap this up and then turn it over to another comrade. Okay, so let's do, okay, real quick with this complex contradiction, dialectical materialism. Here's like the basic idea, right, of the Marxist methodology for understanding society. There is an ancient philosophical problem that concerns the relationship between the ideas that we have about reality and that reality itself, right? The material reality. This is the mind. This is the body. This is ideas, right? This is material existence. And so, sciences have dealt with this problem in different ways, right? One of the ways to deal with this is to find your truth in the ideas, right? Or in the logical consistency of what you're thinking. And the biggest example of that is this wonderful subject that we all know as mathematics, right? Math, we can find our truth that 2 + 2 = 4 just by thinking, right? It's logical. Everyone's going to get the same result. Similarly, we could find our ultimate truth in observations of reality. And so, we have to think, but we're just going to observe what exists. And the biggest example of this is this wonderful little field that we all love taking classes of in high school called physics, right? We can know that the speed of gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared, or whatever it is, by observing objects falling, right? We can get our truth in observation. What, revolutionary theory is all about, Marxism, dialectical materialism, is recognizing that when we're talking about society, we have to change our, standard of truth, right? We cannot just think the most rational ideas and be correct about society. Similarly, we cannot just observe what's going on in society, right? Actually, both of these, the ideas that we have about reality and that material reality, are always co-causing and co-defining each other, right? So there's no ultimately true ideas about society. The best we can get are partial ideas, right? Partial truths. And this thing about the working class and exploitation is a partial truth, right? That's why this is not the most important thing, but it's really important, right? And so, when we're thinking about class struggle, when we're engaging in class struggle, right? This is the thing that we should know, that we're not going to come up with some magical argument that's going to get us to communism, right? And we're also not going to deduce, what the right thing to do is based off of history. We have to look at both of these things. And so within the Engels reading, there's this, popular Marxist idea that's been around for a long time, clearly since Engels, and that is that if we keep developing technology, then we will get to communism, basically, because as technology progresses, we will get, cheaper, goods and services that we need. And at some point, we're not going to need the capitalists, right? Another version of this is economic determinism, right? And the Soviet Union did this. We need to develop our means of production, right? We need to develop our production technology. And the more that we do that, the faster we will get to communism, right? I am rejecting that. It's important to, have technological development, but there's a lot of Marxists now who say that's not the most important thing. It's just a part of the picture, right? Sorry, Aiden, I don't know if I don't think you're a technological determinist, but going after Engels. All right, I think I got one more thing for you, and then I'll turn it over. We good on time? I could talk forever. I love attention, it's terrible. All right. Oh, yeah. They say theory is also boring, but. Okay. So we got all these ideas, or we got this complex contradiction, da 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 da, right? Everything is complex. So out of this like fundamental uncertainty, right, what do, right? We all take our best guesses. And, you know, by studying this, like, you know, the dialectical relationship between ideas and material reality, we can come up with some roadmaps. And the big roadmap that is talked about in this reading and just in general is the communist mode of production. And this idea communism is a very large concept which can mean many different things. What it's trying to deal with is this problem of exploitation, right? So the basic, feature of communism is that there is no more exploitation. And what that means positively, right? We have no more of this, but what we are going to have instead is that the people who produce the surplus are going to be the ones who decide how it is spent. That's the basic idea. No more bosses, right? No more CEOs telling us what to do. We are going to do this democratically, right? And there's a lot of different ways to make that happen, right? The Soviet Union strategy was, let's take over the government. And we will use the government as the main agent for democratically producing, right? Deciding what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, what to do with the profits, right? So that's kind of the main feature. A second feature that's also important is no more profit maximization. And instead, we are going to produce rationally. And I kind of skipped over this before, but capitalism is different from slavery and feudalism most of the time. There are exceptions to this, in that the capitalist class has to maximize profits, right? We could think about this, I guess it really doesn't matter, but if we were to have a commodity, right? Never mind, we're not going to do that. Basically, once we get democratic control over the means of production, right? And the means of production are the factories, the offices, right? Everything you need to make stuff. Once we get control over that, we are going to decide what to do with it much more rationally, right? We're going to have a long-term plan. We're going to say we need to stop climate change. We need to make sure that everybody has enough education, right? Etc., right? And we cannot do this now because the members of the capitalist class who are deciding what to do with the surplus are, at least superficially in competition with each other. And they certainly, even if they looked out for each other, they don't really care about the working class, right? As long as you can come back to work on Monday. They don't really care what they do to us. So that's going to change in communism. There's a couple things here in Engels that he speculates, and I think this is cool. Engels wrote this in 1847. This is before most of all of this stuff about, dialectical materialism had been, written or thought. So it's cool. Engels has some intuition things I want to draw out real quick. One is, and I'm sorry, this, transition from exploitation to democratically producing the surplus is what Marx and Engels call association, right? So in the reading, he said we're going to replace competition with association, right? We're going to have an association of workers producing the surplus. So these are the big ideas. Some of the details that will change. First, the division of labor, right? In other words, you're not going to be condemned to just have one job for the rest of your life. It doesn't make sense. If we democratically make decisions, then you could have easily like 5 jobs, right? Monday, you make beer, right? Tuesday, you teach Marxist economics. Wednesday, you weave baskets. I don't know. And we can do that. It's completely technologically feasible. And with that comes not getting burned out on one job, right? You're not going to be stuck there. Another thing that Engels talked about is to get rid of money. never mind, we're not going to talk about that. We'll get rid of money later. Oh, another one is this distinction between the city and the country, right? So the city has, you all know about that. Communism is going to get rid of the distinction between city and country, right? And all different geographic like dislocations, right? Conflicts with that. And it's also going to change the way that we do social reproduction. He calls this like the family or the family form. I think that kind of alludes to the other system that's behind all, or that's also there, which is patriarchy, right? We need to abolish patriarchy. And a lot of communists, there's a whole debate on this. I'm going to stop talking soon. There's a whole debate, do we need to abolish capitalism before we can abolish racism or patriarchy, right? From this perspective of complex contradiction and anti-essentialist Marxism, there's really no answer to that. They're all bad, and we need to kind of, fight them and replace them at about the same time. Like all of these are, even patriarchy and racism could be thought of as class struggle. If we think about class in the general sense of groups of people, right? This is really social struggle, right? Social conflict. And nobody has the right answer, right? That's the last thing I think I'll say. If somebody tells you, hey, we wrote the Constitution of the Socialist Republic of North America and it's got all the answers, no, they don't have all the answers. Revolution is extremely complex. We have to figure out basically how to replace everything in society, right? So it means understanding class struggle, and it also means understanding interpersonal drama, right? It's extremely complex. Nobody has the answers, right? We're all trying. That's as good as we can do. And we do have wins. And we're going to win, definitely. Also, we've never used our development, right? We throw around this term development. We don't use it to develop people, right? But we can in the revolution or, in communism. So that's my pitch for communism and class struggle. I think I'll turn it over unless there's any burning thoughts or questions. We're going to have discussion and stuff too.